on to the comps. This is where it gets a little confusing sometimes.
Yeah, this is going to be the challenging part. All of these fields, the subject information is entered on that left-hand column, and all of the comparable information is all accurate information that is obtained through a third party, either a realtor, public records, or the appraiser has appraised that comparable before and has the information that's related to each property. None of those fields are opinions until you get to the adjustments. And when someone's reading across those lines, and I'm going to go to just go halfway down to where it says condition, just above the total room count, bedrooms and baths is the line right there. Mm-hmm. The condition of the property is going to go back to those acronyms I was talking about, whether it's C1 through C6. Those are going to be the opinion of the appraiser, because your idea of the condition of a property may be different than my idea of a condition of a property. You may not care if you dust once a year, and I may prefer to dust once a day. So the condition ratings can differ, which is why Fannie and Freddie came up with these specific definitions. But there can be changes between a C3, it could go up into a C2 or drop down into a C4. And a reader just needs to understand that those opinions in condition and quality are the opinion of the appraiser that's putting the appraisal together. Everything else there is accurate data, like the size of the site, the age of the comparable, so forth.
Okay.
Okay. You've got a specific question on this field?
Just where are we now? Because were you saying summary of sales comparison approach? Is that the part you were just talking about?
Yeah, it's in that sales comparison approach section.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So reconciliation is the next one, or is that part of it?
Yeah, reconciliation. Let me back up to the sales comparison approach a minute. In the sales comparison approach, that's the meat of the valuation analysis that the appraiser completes. That's going to tell any reader how the appraiser came up with the value that their opinion of value. They are going to make adjustments for differing quality and condition. They're going to make adjustments for differing ages, differing living areas, as well as a difference in heating and cooling, number of garages, designs, and all of those adjustments are typically market-derived adjustments that the appraiser has calculated in some form or a fashion at other times during other appraisals, or that is known for an adjustment. And I'm going to give you an example. In my area here in Modesto, the market typically will only pay $5,000 to $10,000 for a pool in a piece of property, even if the pool costs $80,000. If you go to sell the house and there's a pool there, the market's only going to pay $5,000 to $10,000 for an in-ground pool. On the adjustment grid, if the subject doesn't have a pool but a comparable does have a pool, then the reader should expect to see a negative $5,000 or $10,000 adjustment. But those adjustments can vary, because in other areas of the company or the country, a pool could be a big plus, or it could be a real negative. If you're in Alaska, the pool is a detriment. It's not an added asset. Whereas if you're in Arizona, and Arizona is not an accurate choice because it's too hot for pools. but someplace where pools are common and your house doesn't have one, the market adjustment may be what it costs to put a pool in. Instead of the $5,000 or $10,000, it may be $80,000. Even if the house only was selling for $200, because everybody else has pools but you don't.
So it just depends on how many of the comps, the local comps, either have it or don't have it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and an appraiser's valuation process is no different than a sophisticated buyer. Because we look at so many houses and we look at the value of specific items in different transactions, we have a pretty knowledgeable eye as to what the value of an item is going to be, like what the value difference is between a 2-car and a 3-car garage, or what the value difference is between 2 baths and 1 bath. Appraisers, by continually doing appraisals, develop a value for each specific market. Now, some markets change. High custom home areas, the values are going to be larger versus the low-end range where 2-bedroom, 1-baths are common and you've got a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. In that area, the market may not pay anything for that extra bath. But an appraiser that's geographically competent and works those areas all the time is going to know that. Okay? I'm just going to drop out of the market grid, the sales comparison approach, and it drops down into it's down into a field that's lender required, which a reader doesn't have to really worry about. It just is telling the lenders that you did look at the transfer history of the subject and comparables. Did they sell recently or 3 years ago? And the lender wants to know, did you consider that in your analysis? From a reader standpoint, a borrower standpoint, it's not relevant unless they're looking at that and they see that their neighbor's house was a comparable and they know that it sold prior to this sale 30 days ago and the appraiser doesn't mention it. That's just another red flag to put with all the other red flags that, okay, the appraiser isn't doing due diligence in research in the appraisal process. Reconciliation, that's just going to tell a reader of the report what was the appraiser's opinion of value. And this is where everybody has a hard time understanding that if the subject is selling for $100,000 and I have 3 identical homes that all sold for $100,000, and I come down to this line and I say, it's my opinion it's only worth $50,000, you can't challenge that because that's my opinion. You may not believe it, which a lender or borrower is that's acceptable, but you can't challenge the opinion. You can challenge the reasoning of why did the appraiser get there, and if the appraiser says, well, the owner threatened me with a gun while I was there, so it's my opinion it's worth $50,000. Now, if he says, yeah, they all sold for $100,000, it's worth $150,000. The user of the appraisal, like the lender or investor, is going to go, why are you so high on your opinion? Not your opinion's wrong, but why is your opinion so high? Okay?
Okay.
The rest of the report is pretty much, blank lines for a narrative or for an appraiser to add narrative. There's a lot of information that all appraisers place in this area that is required by the federal government, such as no, I was not paid extra money to do this appraisal, and no, I'm not going to buy this house if I appraise it too low. There's a lot of certifications that go in that section that appraisers have placed in there at the requirement of the government. Okay? Cost approach is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a method the appraiser uses to show the reader that this is what here's what the land value is. Here's what it would cost to replace the structure and garage and fences and so forth. Here's what the depreciation is. If it's a 15-year-old house and you expect it to survive for 60 years, and it means there's 45 years left, there's some depreciation. The final indicated value used in the cost approach, if the appraiser is knowledgeable, it should be fairly close to what his opinion of value was in that $100,000 example I gave you. Lately in our area, the cost to build so exceeds what you can sell the home for that the cost approach is always significantly higher. And what we do is we use that to show the investor that this area is still depressed because you can't have new construction in our area because a builder could never sell their home for what it costs them to build. And that's more for an investor especially to see that they're still in a depressed market. So if they're in acquisition position of acquiring real estate, this is a great time to be acquiring real estate in this area because it can only go up until it reaches that point of it costs the same to build as it does to sell. On the form, the income approach is never used in a single-family home. It's there because Fannie and Freddie require it, but it's not a method of valuation.
Okay.
And the rest of the appraisal is pretty much what Fannie and Freddie have required appraisers to have in a report. Well, the attorneys for Fannie and Freddie said this is what you have to have in the appraisal. Mm-hmm. And that's all the assumptions and limiting conditions.